Plagues and pandemics are a very unfortunate part of life on Earth, as many of us have found out the hard way throughout history. But while some plagues can occur accidentally in nature, others are much more deliberate, even being used as a tool of war or a bioweapon. Sounds like something out of a James Bond movie, doesn't it? Well, today we'll be looking at the first recorded case of biological warfare in ancient history, which frighteningly may have indirectly killed 200 million people. This is Ben, and you're watching Ancient Origins. Our story is set in the 1300s and takes place on a little peninsula in the Black Sea known as Crimea after it was conquered by the Golden Horde of the Mongols. Since ancient times, empires have fought over Crimea because whoever controls its Black Sea ports has access to three huge markets: the Balkans, the Mediterranean, and the Middle East. As a result, it's a hugely important location, not only for naval security, but for trade in particular. That's part of why, still to this day, Russia and the Ukraine are on the verge of war over this key piece of land. But that's a side issue. The point is, Crimea has been a key naval hub for centuries, and back in the 1300s, after the Mongols captured it, the site's value was no different. In particular, the coastal city of Kafa, modern-day Feodosia, on the peninsula had a lot of potential as a trading settlement. As a result, the Mongol rulers sold the city to traders from the Republic of Genoa in modern-day Italy. This allowed the Genoese to set up shop as a merchant colony there in exchange for certain benefits to the Mongol rulers of the region. Muslim historian Ibn Battuta, who lived in the 1300s, visited the city, and he said that it was a great city along the sea coast inhabited by Christians, most of them Genoese. He called it one of the world's celebrated ports. And celebrated it was. It was wildly financially successful for both the Christians and the Mongols, and was basically a conduit for all trade goods coming through the Great Silk Road. However, there was one small problem. By this point in history, most of the Mongols had adopted the religion of Islam, while the Genoese, being from Italy, were naturally Christians. You have to remember that in the 1300s, the Crusades had just taken place in the preceding periods and were only just beginning to taper off. Tensions between Muslims and Christians had never been higher, and there was a lot of interfaith conflict throughout the known world. As a result, scuffles and disputes would regularly break out between the two groups until one day in the nearby city of Tana, a fight between the Genoese Christians and the Mongol Muslims left one Muslim dead. The Christians, fearing retaliation, fled to the friendly, mostly Christian city of Kafa, where they'd been doing their trading, and they were offered protection inside. When the Mongols came looking for the culprits, the city refused to give them over, and that's when all hell broke loose. You see, the Mongols at this time were led by Muslim warlord Janai Beg, the Khan of the Golden Horde and a direct descendant of the infamous and feared Genghis Khan a century before. Determined not to let this insult of disobedience go unpunished, Janai Beg laid siege to the city of Kafa for its insolence. Unfortunately for him, however, the siege did not go as expected. Not only did the city's 80,000 or so inhabitants manage to repel the attack, but they gave the Mongol army a major bloody nose, forcing them to retreat after suffering as many as 15,000 casualties and significant damage to their siege equipment. This victory was a substantial one at the time, but he who laughs last laughs longest, and this would not be the last that the city of Kafa saw of Janai Beg. 2 years later, in 1345, the Khan returned, but this time he had a secret weapon, whether he knew it or not. One that neither side could ever have anticipated. You see, by the 1300s, Asia had been plagued by, well, the plague. Black Death had been ravaging the Central Asian region for decades, being carried by the fleas found on the backs of rats and other such vermin. As a result, because Crimea was such a significant trading hub, the Black Death had made its way along the Silk Road from Asia to the Black Sea region, carried by rats in the cargo holds of ships. When the second siege began between the Muslims and the Christians, the attacking Mongol army was struck by a bout of Black Death, which quickly ripped through the camp, severely weakening and demoralizing the invading forces. One can only imagine the horror of the symptoms. Blackening and decay of the flesh in the extremities was common, with one's nose, fingers and toes becoming gangrenous and rotten. Bleeding from the mouth, nose, rectum, or even one's skin was a feature of the disease, as was diarrhea, vomiting and a fever. and by that point it was usually only a matter of time before you kicked the bucket. Reeling from this invisible enemy, the Mongol forces concluded that misery loves company and decided to offer their Christian friends a little present. And so, loading bodies of the deceased infected into their catapults, the Muslim forces launched the bodies over the walls and into the Genoese city, where they reportedly burst open, spreading the disease throughout the population. At that point, the damage was done. The Black Death was now in Kafa. While the siege ended after 2 years amid negotiations between the attackers and defenders, the death had already started to take hold. As Christians attempted to flee back to Europe, traveling to Greece, Italy and Asia Minor, they took the disease with them, and the city, being such a trading hub, accidentally exported the infection far and wide. Ultimately, the plague would go on to claim between 75 and 200 million human lives across Asia and Europe, killing about half of China's population, not to mention between 30 to 60% of Europe's. While the world did eventually recover from this disaster, of course, it just goes to show the potentially devastating effects that biological warfare could have on humanity. We sadly learned that lesson the hard way once before. Let's hope we'll never have to learn it again. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to share it with your friends and subscribe to us on all social media sites. Check us out at ancientorigins.net for more fascinating historical content like this. As always, thanks for watching.